The Monday Night Wars were a great time to be a professional wrestler. Not only did talent have WWE and WCW as options, but ECW as well. On the flip side, plenty of wrestlers who came to prominence in ECW would go to either WWE or, as we're going to look at today, WCW. It didn't always work out as well as they'd hoped though, and the allure of Ted Turner's checkbook and a national platform was sometimes offset by misuse and poor creative that in some cases threatened to derail careers completely. I'm Sam Driver from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 ECW stars who flopped in WCW. Join us! Number 10, Chris Candido and Tammy Sytch. It's no secret that Chris Candido, who wrestled as Body Donna Skip, didn't have the best of times during his WWE run. Underutilized and allegedly targeted backstage by the Clique, Candido left WWE in late '96 and joined ECW, having previously worked there when it was Eastern rather than Extreme Championship Wrestling. No gimmicks needed, became a bigger star under Paul Heyman's watchful eye, and had a good spot as a member of the Triple Threat stable. And in the summer of '98, he was joined in ECW by his long-term girlfriend Tammy "Sunny" Sytch, who had been let go by WWE. Their time in ECW was productive, and they were seen as stars in the Philadelphia-based promotion, but Candido and Sytch left under a cloud in late '99. There was only one place left for both of them to go, and for a few months in 2000, Tammy and Chris worked as a double act for WCW. But the company was a mess at that point, as were Candido and Sytch's personal lives, and the duo were eventually sent packing. Their subsequent pitches to return to the fold fell on deaf ears. Number 9, Sabu. In the 90s, there were few professional wrestlers as revolutionary or as spectacular as Sabu. Though Terry Brunk liked to march to the beat of his own drum and was an independent spirit, he did listen to offers from both WWE and WCW during the course of the decade, famously turning down Vince McMahon in order to stick with Paul Heyman. But Sabu was on the outs with ECW in '95 due to a situation where he chose a more lucrative New Japan gig instead. New Japan, of course, had a working relationship with WCW at the time, and Eric Bischoff was keen to bring Sabu in. In the end, Sabu ended up working just a handful of matches for WCW, including the second ever edition of Nitro and the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. But due to a miscommunication over pay, Sabu charged $500 for the first shot but expected more going forward, as well as WCW being unhappy with Sabu doing unapproved spots during his matches, the relationship quickly soured, and he was fired despite never signing a proper contract. Years later, WCW would try to sign Sabu to a lucrative long-term deal, which fell through after Heyman threatened to sue them. Number 8, Mikey Whipwreck. Lovable loser Mikey Whipwreck became a cult hero in ECW with as much thanks to Paul Heyman's booking as his own talent. Mikey was a hard worker, no doubt, but Heyman knew what situations and storylines would maximize his strengths and not expose his weaknesses. The former ECW champion's, consistency caught the eye of WCW, who poached Mikey in late '98. And in typical WCW fashion, they proceeded to do absolutely nothing with him, as Whipwreck collected mailbox money for months before finally showing up at Uncensored 99 to challenge Cruiserweight champion Billy Kidman. Though he lost, Mikey looked good in defeat, and it was a promising debut. But that was really as good as it would get for Whipwreck, who quickly settled into the role of putting everyone else on the roster over. WCW clearly never knew what to do with Mikey Whipwreck, and he was released less than a year into his run. He went back to ECW, where Heyman was hesitant to use him in anything more than a mid-card role after how he'd flopped in Turnertown. Number 7, the Sandman. James Fullington was another misfit that Heyman took and booked to perfection by accentuation of his positives and hiding the negatives. From a go-nowhere surfer gimmick, the Sandman transformed into a beer-drinking, cigarette-smoking, cane-swinging rebel who became a major star for ECW in spite of the fact that his matches were generally pretty awful. It was the persona and the epic entrance which really got him over with the Philadelphia faithful, who were sad to see Sandman sign with WCW in September of '98. Now known as Hardcore Hack, Fullington reportedly signed a 3-year deal worth $250,000 a year, substantially more than he was earning in ECW. And while there were occasional highlights, including a surprisingly good hardcore match with Bam Bam Bigelow at Spring Stampede, it's fair to say that WCW didn't really get a whole lot for their investment, and in October of '99, it was no surprise to see Hack get axed when the company were looking to significantly cut costs. Heyman had vowed not to take him back, but, well, we all know how that goes, don't we? Exit light, enter night. Number 6, the Public Enemy. I feel like I've said this a lot already, but the Public Enemy were yet another example of Paul Heyman's genius in getting the very best out of performers who may have otherwise been exposed by their shortcomings. Johnny Grunge and Flyboy Rocco Rock were far from technically gifted, and a lot of their shtick, from the way they dress to their promos, looks very cringe today, but their brawling, table-breaking antics made them firm favorites in Philly back in the day. Heyman's booking of Public Enemy worked so well that in late 1995, WWE and WCW got into something of a bidding war over their services, a bidding war that ATM Eric ultimately won. In WCW, Grunge and Rocco Rock were a watered-down, lamer version of their ECW selves, who, outside of a very brief run as tag champs, were mostly used as an opening card act. Despite not really being all that over, and their ability paling in comparison to the bulk of the teams they worked with, Public Enemy stuck around for close to 3 years before being released. Number 5, Bam Bam Bigelow. One of the most impressive big men in professional wrestling history, Bam Bam Bigelow was a hot property who worked on top in Japan, WWE, ECW, and elsewhere. The Beast from the East famously headlined WrestleMania 11 opposite NFL star Lawrence Taylor, but a sustained push never materialized, and after leaving WWE, Bigelow wound up in ECW. Heyman had helped Bam Bam get his start in the business by promoting his very first match, and clearly ECW's head honcho was a firm believer in the man he'd discovered. Bigelow won the ECW heavyweight title and then had a run as ECW television champion. As a member of the Triple Threat stable, he was consistently in the main event picture and had memorable outings with the likes of Rob Van Dam and Spike Dudley. But WCW could always offer more money and security, and Bama jumped ship at the end of '98. Over the course of the next couple of years, there'd be a few bright spots, but WCW was in a state, and really, Bigelow was physically past his best and ended up as just another guy on a bloated roster. Number 4, Jerry Lynn. Unlike everyone else on this list, Jerry Lynn was someone who became a bigger star in ECW after having a disappointing spell in WCW. The native Minnesotan had made his reputation as an exciting up-and-comer on the indies and overseas in Japan, with a series of matches with Shawn Lightning Kid Waltman standing out as particularly excellent. With WCW wanting to beef their cruiserweight division up at the start of the Nitro era, Lynn was given a call and came in as the masked Mr. JL. But WCW evidently had no real plans for him, and Mr. JL spent the best part of the next 2 years primarily putting over people on C shows like Main Event, Saturday Night, and Worldwide. Lynn contemplated quitting the business altogether after his release in the summer of '97, but accepted a few dates with ECW, and, after putting in a series of impressive performances, became a full-timer and future ECW heavyweight champion, whose work was one of the promotion's highlights during its dying days. Number 3, Stevie Richards. Stevie Richards came to prominence as a member of Raven's Nest before the so-called Clueless Putz joined up with Nova and the Blue Meanie to form the BWO. The NWO parody was a popular act, and Big Stevie Cool, somewhat improbably, found himself competing against Terry Funk and the Sandman in a prime spot on ECW's first ever pay-per-view, Barely Legal. Not long after, however, issues with Heyman, particularly Paulie's strong-arm negotiation tactics, convinced Richards to sign with WCW, where he first feuded with and then joined forces with Raven. But with a neck injury severely hampering him and having had a very real falling out with Scott Levy behind the scenes, the Flock member left WCW within a matter of months after realizing that his chances of getting any sort of serious push as a singles act were slim to none. And then he showed back up in ECW for a handful of matches. His injury woes threatened to end his career entirely, as neck surgery led to vocal cord issues, which also required surgery, but he was fortunate enough to be able to return to the ring, albeit for WWE, not ECW. Number 2, Shane Douglas. Shane Douglas had a first WCW spell to forget, as he was one half of the lamentable Dynamic Dudes tag team. But after a run in WWE, he came back to WCW and traded in Johnny Ace for Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Various issues and frustrations then caused him to leave WCW and join ECW. In Paul Heyman's promotion, Douglas wouldn't be presented as any mere mid-carder. Instead, he was pushed as the promotion's heavyweight champion and franchise player. He would take one more jaunt to New York, but after finding out that the WWE grass wasn't greener, Shane again came back to ECW and was once again pushed as the promotion's top guy. Which is all well and good, but what's the point of being champ if you're not being paid? Besides a feud with Ric Flair that played off their real-life animosity and a couple of token reigns with the tag team and US titles, the franchise's final WCW stay was memorable only for the bad storylines, angles, and matches that he was a part of. There were plans for the proposed new management to revive Shane's career toward the end, but he never returned from injury before the company closed down for good. And number 1, Mike Awesome. After prioritizing his Japanese commitments throughout the 90s, Mike Awesome finally joined ECW proper in 1999. Paul Heyman wanted to build the promotion around Awesome, a phenomenal athlete who really did live up to his name. Awesome was reigning as ECW World Heavyweight Champion as the company entered the new millennium, with Heyman hoping to book a major match between the champ and Rob Van Dam once RVD had recovered from an ankle injury. But before that could happen, WCW swooped in and signed Awesome. A messy situation which led to the novelty of Awesome, a WCW contracted wrestler, dropping the ECW title to WWE contracted wrestler Taz at an ECW show. It caused a lot of aggro and took a lot of money for WCW to pry Awesome away from ECW, so you'd think they'd want to get a return on that investment, right? Well, instead, Awesome almost immediately got lost in the shuffle and was then saddled with the awful Fat Chick Thriller and That 70s Guy gimmicks because Vince Russo